Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dexter New Blood. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I love the fact is that obviously we're having that complicated situation of Dexter and Harrison. And once again, I will point this out. Just in totality across the episode, he made snarky remarks, not snarky, but just the remark of I went without you for 10 years, Jim. I think I'll be fine. The fact is he's acclimating to this whole Jim thing, but I guess it's right. I never really knew you as Dexter. I was a kid when you left as Dexter, so me calling you Jim. But the fact is, even he's later on oh yeah, cops. I don't want cops up in my business. He's oh, Dexter's like father, like son, but I'm I think he's so focused, he's gotten so much whiplash from Harrison being in his life that he just isn't asking certain questions he probably should. But that's the thing of I still have that instinct in me to kind of believe that he's not Harrison. Like I said, there's still a part of me that's just I get the feeling this kid is faking it. But also at the same time, it's he brings up certain things. You're it sounds like Harrison, but that could be him BSing his way through this. He could be a con artist, just trying to, I don't, what would be the point of doing that? Not unless you're just some lonely kid looking for someone to fill that void, and so you took someone else's life hoping that you'd get a dad out of this. Once again, I know it's a wild theory I had since last episode, but I'm it's still there somewhere in me, because I feel that's going to be the twist to it. But like I said, that's just what I'm feeling. But there's a good chunk of me that's no, I think it legitimately is Harrison because of all the information that's there. We did sadly find out about what happened to Hannah. Pancreatic cancer, wasn't it? It's Jesus, she died 3 years ago. It's better because I was hoping, please don't tell me something bad happened. I wonder, did they write that around? Because I don't know if because I always feel I'm butchering her name, but it's Yvonne, right? The actress who played Hannah. I know she's in, I haven't watched the show at all, but I know she's in Handmaid's Tale. I don't know if she's been in the most recent stuff. Maybe she has, but maybe maybe they just decided to go down this route, or maybe she was just so scheduled up with other stuff that she didn't have our opportunity to do this. Because obviously most recently, probably that, and I know she was in the Tomorrow War, so I don't know if that conflicted with this show's scheduling, so she didn't have an opportunity to come back. Or maybe it's just, like I said, it could just easily be no, this is the story they wanted to write, because it's if so, it hits, because it's right. Not only did your biological mom die, she was murdered by a serial killer, also your stepmom, who was the only other family you got left, because other than your dad, your aunt's gone, so you had no one else in your life, because all your other family, the closest person beyond that would be Jamie, and obviously she's in Florida, so makes you wonder, he did go to Florida at one point in time, is what he was saying, so it makes me wonder, did he ever drop in on them? Just to kind of check in on them and letting them know, hey, I'm here and I'm okay. I don't know. That's just what was kind of going through my mind. I'm wondering will we get any answers on that front. But, yeah, it's sad knowing about Hannah. Also, once again, knowing that at least he had her for that amount of time, but it doesn't make it easier just for me. Man, both of the mothers in my life gone, so that sucks. And obviously that hits hard for Dexter, because at the very least he was hoping that Hannah would be there, which she was, but to find out she's going to, that he didn't even know that she had died either, and in a way like that too, it's heartbreaking, So now Dexter's trying to figure and balance this all out, but then he also notices that was kind of sloppy. I left the blood trail, let me cover this up. Oh, cool. All the police are here because Matt was going missing, and this connects to the hunting area, so it's cool. And Angela's oh, who's this? Oh, I'm Harrison. I'm Jim's son. It's ooh. Oh, nice to meet you, Harrison. And it's okay. And Angela's not too happy about that subject. Granted, even Dexter was surprised by how she handled it, because she was later on, she's no, it's actually good. I get it. You have certain aspects of your life that you don't want to talk about when it came to the past. She's even there's certain things I don't talk about. Obviously, she talks about, Audrey. Audrey's not my biological daughter. I adopted her. There is someone called Iris that was brought up, and I'm curious, is that, Angela's biological daughter that might have died or something like that? Or maybe it's a sibling or something, or maybe she's, sibling as in she's Angela's sibling, or maybe she's Audrey's sibling, or maybe it was maybe that's, Angela's, it's someone that died, and because the way Audrey threw it at her near the end of the episode makes it seem oh yeah, it was someone that died, and that's kind of the key reasons why she's as overprotective as she is. But aside from all of that, she's more open. She's like, right, now we can be like, there's certain aspects of my life I didn't think I could share with you. Like the fact is of like, being a parent, but now we can both talk in that, like, both dealing with teenagers, and obviously it's a conversation about not wanting to like, what if you're not up for it? But it's like, in Angela's perspective, it's like, all you got to do is be there for her. And then she started overloading him and being like, yeah, I got to get him into school, then get ready for college prep. And then Dexter's just like, Jesus, he just got here a day and I'm already thinking about college prep, so it's like, yeah, all that's kind of hitting at once, considering like, yeah, he is a teenager. He's not that little kid anymore. Because even he's like, yeah, I don't want blueberry pancakes. Yeah, I liked them when I was a kid, but I'm not 5 anymore. There's that. So their relationship is, because he does say like he hasn't been here in Iron Lake too long, and even then like the whole because Harrison had said he had tracked him down to Oregon because it was about the letter. He had gotten a letter, and then the only reason why he was able to find Dexter is because the bowling team, like, one of the people put up like something on Instagram about like, a photo of like, hey, this guy just scored a 300. So if it wasn't for that, it's like, cool. I guess that's why you've avoided social media like crazy, but it's just like, right, you always have to be cognizant of it. But I guess it's also like his instincts aren't what they used to be because he's let a lot of stuff slide. Because you haven't flexed your hiding, like you haven't flexed that muscle in so long that you get lax. You never think about like all it takes is one thing to make this house of cards come crumbling down. So, but the fact is that regardless of that, like obviously it's the search for Matt, and everyone's got to like be on helping out with it. Obviously Dexter's like, oh yeah, like, me and Harrison, we'll go check it out. And as they're driving like an ATV, he's making sure to hit all the blood spots and stuff like that. So, and it's like, oh yeah, oh god, this deer, like this might be a crime scene. Harrison, why don't you go get Angela? And as he's doing it, he's prepping the scene. And to me, I continue to praise it because I love it so much. Because you also like, you saw bits and pieces of this with Jennifer Carpenter's like previous like work as Deborah in the show, but like she gets to really lean into like the like super sarcastic side of Deb. Like Deb always was like super sarcastic, but like she gets to lean into it and just like laughing at Dex. I'm like, Harry, he never had this experience with Harry. Also, it's just like, I love how they represent that now, because like Harry was always like the helpful person. Deborah's the opposite. She is a manifestation of his subconscious, because it's like, yeah, Deborah supported you in the end, but under like who you had become, the new Dexter you were becoming, not the old Dexter you were now potentially reverting back to, which Dexter's like, no, I'm new and old me. I'm evolving. I'm constantly changing. I evolved before and I'm evolving again. I'm not the same monster I was before, even though you subconsciously have the same concern. But like that vision he had of her, I love it, and it's so creepy. Just her outside tapping on the glass with the bullet, most likely the one Daniel used to kill her, that she got shot with, but she's tapping on, and she's just like, breaks the glasses, I go away, she's like, you're not listening, and she's just like, you're gonna fuck him up and you're gonna kill him, either way, and then makes Dexter swallow the bullet. I was like, he's never had anything like that. Like, yes, he had disagreements with Harry in his head, but never anything this aggressive. Because that's why I'm like, even the way it was done, I was like, that's not even a typical Harry thing. So it's that, like, that's purely a manifestation of your subconscious, like, you're just, like, caught in your own thoughts? Or is that supposed to be, like, Deborah has a very different space in his head than Harry does? And I think that's and I think they do that on purpose to show you the difference between Deb in his head and what she represents and what Harry represented it. Because Harry represented you, following the code, trying to stay a step ahead, whereas Deborah is kind of like no, you're wrong, don't do this, you're going to fuck Harrison up. But to the point, like, when he's cleaning up the crime scene, she's laughing at him. It's like, oh, you're going to get caught. And just like, she's so antagonistic. I love, because at least him and Harry were a team. Him and Deb are no longer, it started off as a team, and it's like, no, we're antagonistic now. I think it's such a neat progression for that. And so, for to be in a situation where, like, he's covering all of his bases, he remembers, like, right, Matt fell on a rock. I'm like, I mean, to be fair, he's got good memory, because he's like, right, he was so rusty, it just happened all of a sudden. He gave into his dark passenger, so he wasn't processing everything like he should have. Granted, he cut the deer's throat because it was like, well, I think also so it wouldn't suffer, but also it helped cover up, the crime scene is kind of what it was. So he got Matt's blood, like Windex did off the rock. She's like, you're really going to Windex a rock? And it's like, yeah. Place one of his gloves near the highway to make it seem like he ran. And then obviously leans into it, like when people are gathering, it's like, thank you for compromising the crime scene. And then it's just like, yeah, oh, hey, Jim. It's like, hey, Abraham, I think Matt Caldwell could have done this. He was hunting out here. And obviously, and it puts Angela in this complicated spot because it's like, she is, torn between, right, like the rest of the town and the indigenous lands. Because it's like, okay, like because Abraham brings up to her, like, the fact is, it's like, oh, all this for Matt, if our women go missing and they never get this coverage. So it's like, eventually you're going to have to pick a side, Angela. So kind of torn between the two worlds she kind of represents. Because she's like, Iron Lake isn't the same as what it used to be. She's like, I'm doing all I can to change it. It's not the way things used to be. But for them, it's like, no matter, even with you there, there's still limitations. Because I'm sure for their perspective, it's like, you're still repping that side of things rather than like looking out, like doing everything for your own people. You are, so maybe that's the angle. At least that's the compromise position, like Angela's kind of in, at least like from other people's lenses. But I love that Dexter's like, damn it, why does my girlfriend have to be so good at her job? Because she's like, you guys back up, you're compromising. It's like, yeah, because he was thinking because of Teddy's, he's only been here like, 2 weeks and a half. It's like, oh yeah, he's like, oh, this might not be as hard as I thought it was. But it's like, no, Angela's really good at her job. But luckily he laid the foundation, all the evidence. He said, oh, hey, like I can always, I gave Matt a gun. I can always go check and see what ammo he got. And it's like, yep, Fred Jr. brings the glove and everything. It's like, oh, thank you, Fred Jr. So it all works out. And it all fits the narrative, especially later on when they bring the buck back, they cut it open and pull the bullet out. And it turns out, yeah, it matches Matt's gun. I also love, we learned that Harrison isn't the awkward human being that Dexter was. I mean, to be fair, Dexter was always an odd duck. But it seems like, oh, Dexter didn't really know how to fake it till he made it until, like, later in life. And at least, like, if Harrison's faking it, he's faking it good. He's like, no, I think I can handle, like, 2 hours without you. And he goes talking to Audrey and her friends and stuff. I even love Deborah being like, oh, looks like he's not a awkward budding serial killer like you. And just like, stop. And I love that one of the girls nearby is like looking at him and she throws up the peace sign and he throws up the peace sign too. Like, because it's like, I mean, luckily he's not talking out loud. He's just sitting there. Because I love, we never get that perspective sometimes. Like when he's talking to someone in his head, whether it was a Harry thing. I don't know if that ever really came up too much. But with Deb, it's just, he's sitting there like, it's kind of, what would I, there's a show that makes a joke about that, but I don't remember. It's like the outside perspective of when someone's like having a vision. I know like That's So Raven because people are like, oh, that's your vision face. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, you go like that, you had a vision. But it was something else where someone was like, having like, oh, it was iZombie. That's what I'm thinking of. Because people like, they make fun of it later on. Because typically when Liv is having a vision, you're just in the vision with her. But like there are occasions on the outside, they'll show you like Liv just stop and just stand there as she's living the vision and just snap out of just, it's kind of like that. I think that's such an interesting point to just show you that representation of like how weird you look. Because all of a sudden you just stop and you're just staring blankly and it's like, oh, I'm doing that. I thought that was interesting. But Harrison's hanging out with the kids. Obviously, like conversations come up about like, oh yeah, like my stepmom died from a couple years ago. He ends up helping the kids break into like a little place. And I'm like, oh, like father, like son. I mean, he's good at breaking into places. I was like, are you about to pick that lock? Your dad would be, you found your way around it, but it wasn't like a full-blown, like, it was the closest thing to a lock picking. But it's like, oh, apparently he's had his run-in with drugs. He's like, yeah, I got clean a couple years ago, so he doesn't touch that. But he's like, yeah, my biological mom died, and then my stepmom died a couple years ago, and she got sick. It's like, oh. So how'd your real mom die? You said your stepmom got, and it's like, oh, and he looks up and I was like, oh. They're like, no, you don't have to talk about it. He's like, no, it's fine. I'm going to get some wood. And this is why I'm kind of like, either he's just good at this or like he has nothing to hide. Is the fact is they were going through his bag and he's got like pictures of people. And I'm like, I'm curious who those pictures. I should have paid more attention. I don't know if it's going to be something either significant for later or is it supposed to be significant before, like in that moment, it's supposed to be insignificant. But the moment he's got the woods and he sees them going through his bag, he just kicks something so they know that he's coming back. So, like, yeah, like, he wasn't too freaked out about it because he's like, oh, get away. It's like, I guess he knows that would just draw more suspicion. But that's why I'm like, he must not have anything to hide if he's just kind of, like, so calm about it. So I'm like, I don't know. I found that fascinating. So, but everything does seem like it gets wrapped up, like, neatly in a bow. Angela did ask Edward for help, which that was my misunderstanding. I thought Edward was Matt's dad. It's like, no, that's not. Edward's just millionaire, but he's also like billionaire rather. He's like, yeah, like, oh, like your daughter, what's her name, Andre? It's like, yeah, that's the thing. They have such a binary view of things, good and evil. Everything's black and white. Like, they just see me as the oil dude. They don't see me as a guy that's actually done good, like the charities. I mean, even to like the stuff that I built for your people and stuff like that. So it's like, and he made sure to let Angela know of like, oh yeah, like all that I've done for your people, like, you know, come on, like, you know, I'm doing you a favor. So kind of almost, it's a slight thread of just kind of being like, hey, if it wasn't, you know, so kind of get your kid back off, because, you know, I mean, because he made it sound like almost like, you know, those charitable things I do could end up disappearing. You know, it's like, Angela's kind of like had to be smiling, be like, yeah, well, could they need his help because he has a helicopter? And he's like, yeah, I'll do whatever I need to help you guys. So I'm assuming he's the one behind like the kidnappings and the missing girls, because we see that girl, I think her name was Lily, like, we see her locked in a room. She's enjoying champagne and, like, I think, chocolate-covered strawberries. But then later on, she throws up, and you're like, she's like, fucking champagne. I'm like, was it spiked? Or was it just, like, she was just enjoying a good life too much? But then, like, she notices she's stuck in the room, because I guess she just never noticed it till now. Or maybe it was a last-minute change or something while she was out. But it seems like there's no doorknob on the inside. Well, maybe it was. I didn't see it on the door, but it didn't sound like she was rattling a doorknob. So she's stuck in there. And then she notices the camera and it says, you are already dead. So either that's something to kill her left, but I'm assuming because it's written in blood like that, I get the feeling like one of the previous victims is like, right, if you're already, by the time you're finding out where you are noticing this camera, you're already dead. That means you've been here long enough that it's too late. Like, so whoever this is, because Iron Lake doesn't just have one serial killer, it has another. Granted, you know, Dexter's a beast all on his own, but whoever this is, which once again, my money's towards Edward, because I think it's probably like that whole billionaire, I can do some type of evil stuff and get away with it. Or it might be someone else. Maybe he just seems like the obvious choice, but there's someone else in town that kind of might, but it's like, yeah. So that's I think it's kind of an interesting development. But obviously Dexter and Harrison talk about, you know, like, he's like, right, like, he's like wanting to get answers finally. He's like, because he hadn't decided whether or not he's going to stay or leave. But he's like, yeah, I do want to know, like, why did you leave? He thought, like, oh, it's because of me. He's like, let me know, reach out to me if he ever has any dark tendencies. Because Hannah never gave him the letter. He found it after Hannah died. And it's like, what you thought something was so wrong? He's like, no, it wasn't you. It was me. I was worried, like, I had my own demons after your mom died. After your Aunt Deb died, I didn't want to fuck you up. And so he wanted to use this as an opportunity to, you know, he felt like Harrison, for one, he's like, yeah, I didn't know you'd be left alone in the world. I thought you'd be better off without me. And he's like, you're not, why do you keep treating yourself like you're an evil person? You're not. From what I remember, you were good, except, he's like, yeah, for just you leaving me. But he's like, right, I can't make up for not being there, but I can, like, that's what I'm saying, like, I think that speaks about, maybe it's because Harrison's, like, he admitted, like, yeah, he's like, I cried with your picture next to my bed, like, for a long time, and then for a long time, I was just angry. So I guess, like, now that he has his dad in his life, because it means, despite everything, it's like, right, I'm not alone in the world anymore, I found you, so maybe that's a piece I'm, because like I said, he's not as angry as I thought he would be, considering he found Dexter, and you're living this life, and you're married, not married, but you're dating a cop, like, you're living a good life, huh? Like, he's so calm about it, but maybe he's just keeping his emotions a lot more in check, like Dexter. Like, that's where I'm like, the moments like that are where I'm like, I'm not sure if he's actually Harrison, or is he just trying to sell the role, or is he actually Harrison? I don't know. We'll ultimately have to wait and find out what's the twist going to be on this situation, because at no point has he, I mean, there's enough to be like, oh, this is Harrison, but I'm like, you haven't actually gotten a blood test to actually see if he is Harrison, so maybe there might be some inconsistencies that come up. Like I said, I get the feeling like they would just make it Harrison, but I'm just like, I just can't shake that part of me that doesn't think he is Harrison, but they are working towards, like, hey, you know, some form of relationship of, like, yeah, I want to at least be here for you now. He's like, yeah, I'd like that. Like, he's just a little more accepting of that than I thought he'd be, but we'll see. Because I know people be probably complaining, like, oh, here he is being like, I get it, he left you, like, storytelling-wise, people probably like, oh, he's whining and complaining, I don't want to whining and complaining. Oh, he's accepting it, you know, he might have his dad's dark proclivities, we don't know yet. maybe he just hasn't talked to Dexter about it because he didn't know what dark tendencies was. So like, I mean, we do know that he's gotten mixed up in drugs, but you know, he's never gone down the route his dad has. So we'll see. But yeah, they're about to call the search off, which I love, and love Deb being like, "Could you like not take you like not be too so fucking happy about it, you smug fuck." I love it because he's so happy, like, "Yep, got away with it." And then lo and behold, who walks in a scene other than Clancy motherfucking Brown? I was like, "Yo!" I didn't know he was in this. I was like, "That's all," because I did kind of spoil myself on. I saw a certain name pop up. I won't say who it is, but I saw another name pop up. I'm like, "Ooh, that's gonna be interesting." Because I understand what capacity this character is going to pop up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that's got to be. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Just under what context that's going to pop up for Dexter. So that I'll talk about it when it happens. But yeah, it's just something I came across. I was like, oh, I didn't know you were going to be in this. But I definitely didn't see Clancy Brown's name. I completely must have like passed over it when I was looking at some stuff, and I'm like, I'm glad, dude, Clancy freaking Brown, Lex Luthor himself, Hank from Detroit Become All Human, or I mean, obviously, Mr. Krabs. I have to bring that up every time because it still blows my mind. I've known for years, and it still blows my mind. Holy shit, Clancy Brown voices Mr. Krabs. Like, that still throws me from time to time. That's still just the wildest thing to me. It's always funny when you find out like who voices who, and you're like, wow, I had no idea you voiced that character. That's so interesting. Really quickly, since I was bringing up Lex Luthor, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Michael C. Hall has done some DC voices. There's at least one. I want to say maybe Batman or Superman. I feel like it was Batman, and like it was definitely like a DC animated movie because I remember seeing his name. I was like, oh, Michael C. Hall, that's interesting. I want to say it was like a Justice League animated movie. I want to say I could be mistaken. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, him popping up like that. I think the most recent thing I saw Clancy Brown in was a short-lived ABC show called Emergence, which I thought it was a pretty interesting science fiction show. I was kind of bummed it only got one season, sadly. But I think that's the most recent thing I've seen him in. But regardless, I was like, he's Matt's dad. And he's like, no, like if Matt was in trouble, he would have called me, especially something like that. That wouldn't have been, essentially, he's saying, my son's such a spoiled brat, he would have come to me to bail him out of trouble, which Dexter knows first and foremost, like what kind of trouble Matt could get in. So this killing a deer or an indigenous land, he's like, yeah, it's a crime, but it's like, no, my son would have called me, so it's like, no, and then he puts it out there like, yeah, what we've done, we donated trucks to the fire department, like, Fred, when your dad's shop's roof came in, like, who gave, it's like, we've been there for each other, like, that's what this Iron Lake town, we're here for each other, so please don't give up on my son. And then just like, all right, we'll stay here tonight, and it's like, okay, cool, well, he's like, Dexter's kind of like, yay! And I love that they're in front of the fire. It's like, yeah, my boy's out there. We'll find him. Yeah, it's like funny because you're literally right on top of it as we lower beneath the fire into the ground where the gun and his severed, dismembered body is. Very, very interesting episode. A lot of really, really interesting things. I'm excited to see where everything takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.